Protective Asset Protection will provide tools to make added protection more attractive and empower your business. Together, we'll help more people gain the sense of security they deserve, because we're all protectors.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Thursday, May 8th, 2025. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Jamie Butters, who's on assignment.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Toyota expects a $1.2 billion tariff hit in April and May. After a sales rush, U.S. inventory falls by 10%, and states sue President Trump for halting a federal EV charger program. Plus, we'll hear from experts about how auto parts tariffs are affecting different parts of the industry.
Import activity is up about 30 to 40%, but probably 90% of it's not real.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
Toyota expects U.S. tariffs to cost the automaker 180 billion yen, or $1.2 billion, in April and May. Those costs are driving a 21% drop in operating profit this fiscal year, even as the company rushes to deflect the blow with higher sales, cost controls, and new revenue streams. Despite uncertainty in the global trade outlook, Toyota still issued financial guidance forecasting its vehicle sales to climb 4.7% to 9.8 million. It expects that to be led by delivery increases in all major markets, including North America, Europe, and Japan. CFO Yoichi Miyazaki says tight inventories and high demand for its cars in the U.S. offer some resilience against the duties. The U.S. is Toyota's biggest and most important market. The world's largest automaker also opened the door to possibly offsetting tariffs with price increases down the road.
New vehicle inventory in the U.S. dropped about 10% over the last month to 2.8 million vehicles. That's as consumers grabbed new vehicles ahead of tariff-related sticker price hikes, expected to arrive over the next few months. Inventory fell from almost 3.1 million a month ago to 2.8 million to start May. That's according to inventory management firm LotLinks, which estimated supply at 58 days, down from 71 days the previous month. A year earlier, new vehicle inventory stood at about 2.8 million, representing a 75-day supply.
California's Attorney General says his state and 16 others are suing President Trump for suspending a $5 billion federal funding program for electric car chargers. Rob Bonta argues that Trump's directives to slash U.S. subsidies for plug-in vehicles since taking office are illegal. The states are challenging Trump's move in February to suspend approval of funds to the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program, or NEVI, which helps to pay for installation of chargers mostly along interstate highways. A spokesperson for U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy did not immediately comment.
And Carvana's meteoric comeback continues. The used vehicle retailer says it broke its quarterly record for sales in the first quarter. The company reported net income of $373 million for the period. Revenue rose 38% to $4.2 billion. Carvana also said its expectations amid auto tariffs remain mostly the same. And those are today's headlines. Coming up, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of parts tariffs with three industry experts. That's next on Daily Drive.
Yeah, my name's Jeremy Beaver. I'm at the Del Gran Dealer Group CEO. We have 17 brands in the heart of Silicon Valley, San Francisco, 1,100 team members selling over 28,000 cars a year. Protective has been a partner of DGDG for a long time, and we are just so thankful for everything they do to help us every day. I've been at DGDG for over 15 years, and we've grown as an organization from 3 stores to the 17 we have today, and Protective has been critical in that growth. Not only in the products we sell, but long-term growth strategy through data, through insights, making sure that we are performing at the absolute best every step of the way. I think when dealers are searching for insurance companies or reinsurance companies, there's obviously plenty of choices in the industry. For us, the most important piece when we chose our partner to go with Protective and have a long-term relationship was exactly that, because of the relationship they provide. A very hands-on approach to helping us grow and drive our business every single day is critical, especially in the automotive industry where it's headed, not only with our guests, but with our team, to make sure that every single day we are at level 10. We continue to lean on our partners at Protective to make sure that we are going in the right direction and that we're gonna be absolutely at our best for years to come.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer with Kellen Walker. Earlier today, Automotive News hosted our latest Congress Conversations live stream. Our own Hannah Lutz and John Irwin spoke with experts about how tariffs and shifting market conditions related to the ever-evolving trade policies are affecting automakers and suppliers. Hannah and John spoke with Sam Fiorani, Vice President of Global Vehicle Forecasting with Auto Forecast Solutions, Whip Fleet Partner Laurie Harbour, and Kate Kalukowicz, Senior Managing Director of McClarty Associates. Here's a piece of their conversation.
Laurie, I want to start with you. You work with a lot of suppliers, and what do they think about this reimbursement? Is this enough relief for them?
Well, on the supplier side, it's a little bit more challenging. And a lot of the work I do is sort of with some, tier ones, but also some tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. So in some cases, they don't, first of all, necessarily know how to navigate that tariff. Everything is sort of overwhelming for them, right? So for them to kind of understand this has become a significant challenge. And of course, when you feel like you understand it, then it changes quite a bit. So, but certainly there's a feeling of there's some relief that for them as suppliers, the benefit becomes the more relief the OEMs get, that means hopefully that car sales don't slow down and that we can sell more cars, which means parts for them, right? So those are the things they're trying to navigate and understand within their space.
And how are they really strategizing? Like, what does their day-to-day look like when it comes to tariffs?
For the companies that I work with, it's very chaotic. Trying to understand just their HTS codes, where my metal is, melted or smelted, and understanding the implication for their product alone, much less this cross-border between Mexico, Canada, and many of those small suppliers, ironically, don't even know where some of their parts end up on the final product of a vehicle. I have a customer that makes seatbelt buckles. They make $2 million a year. They don't know that it's made in a GM plant in, San Luis in Mexico. They just know that they send it to a tier 1 supplier. So navigating that and understanding it right now feels like chaos. And in some cases, people are saying that's more painful than the tariff itself.
Wow. Okay. The chaos is very painful.
Mm-hmm.
Kate, I wanted to ask you, from a trade perspective, do we know how the logistics of this reimbursement are going to play out? I know the Commerce Department is directed to come up with the mechanism over the next 30 days, but do we have an idea of what that reimbursement process might look like, and what will that entail?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one I think that has bedeviled many industries as they've tried to navigate all of these new tariffs around what we consider administrability, right? And generally, Customs and Border Protection is responsible for how tariffs are applied, who's paying the tariffs, how reimbursements are applied. The new arrangement the president put out last week is quite novel, of course, in the sense that it's not necessarily the importers getting credit, it's the OEMs. And so I think at present, what's happening is quite a lot of in-depth discussion between those representing the OEMs and the Commerce and Customs departments trying to sort out exactly how this will work.
And Sam, we also talked about the non-stacking of tariffs that was announced. We had the parts reimbursement, also the non-stacking. Some tariffs on parts previously stacked with steel and aluminum. How much does that non-stacking now benefit the industry?
Well, with metals coming from Canada, from Mexico, these items would have, under the original plan, been tariffed multiple times because you're getting Canadian metals and then a Canadian part, and if it comes across the border multiple times, you'll see the stacking of these tariffs, and it could multiply that tariff many times. By not doing that, now we're at a one-time tariff, so now the part suppliers are not being burdened by all this trouble that the stacking would have provided. It's just a very complex system, and it was overly complex to start with.
Sure. And we know that automakers and trade groups have been to Washington. They've been lobbying the White House to make some of these changes. Kate, I want to go to you for this one. What do these changes, the non-stacking and the parts reimbursement, what do they say about the relationship between the Trump administration now and the auto industry? Do they give the industry more certainty or clarity long term?
Well, look, I think it shows that they're listening, right? I think you're right. I mean, lots of interested parties have descended on Washington and gotten audiences with the White House, with Congress, with others. And, I think that this change, while of course not perfect and while of course confusing, it still reflects a point of view that the auto sector, particularly the North American auto sector, because we haven't talked about the exemptions for USMCA, which also remain in place. The president, I think, understands now that to support American auto manufacturing, he has got to come up with some allowances to either allow for some time to change these supply chains, to allow for the continued strength of North America to support the industry. And so, for me, these are all very positive signs that, at least in the auto sector, because of course, these are the first major changes that he's granted since he's made all of these announcements. Along with today's announcement with the UK that they're going to be given some preference on autos. We see some movement. So I think altogether, there's still work to be done, no doubt. But altogether, this is a positive signal from the White House.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought up USMCA. We're going to get deeper into USMCA later. And you also mentioned the changes to tariffs on the UK that are, I think, being announced right now. So we don't have all the details on that yet, but please follow autonews.com for more, and we'll have that up later today.
Sam, it's been the $1 million question ever since, tariffs have been rolled out. But now given all the changes that we've seen over the past few weeks, how do you see the tariffs, especially with the new changes, affecting production and sales forecasts over the course of the year?
It's on multiple levels. We have the production problems with the additional costs, and a lot of suppliers not being able to deal with the additional tariffs that their parts may or may not be burdened with. Once we get past the small suppliers who could potentially could potentially go out of business. These companies are not making a lot of money, and they're not huge companies. They can't weather a lot of financial burdens like this, and so that could slow down production. The larger suppliers are going to have an easier time with it, but it's still going to be a burden to them as well. Once we get past the production issues, then we're going to have less choice, because manufacturers aren't going to see the profitability of making a smaller vehicle that is fully imported. These vehicles coming from South Korea and Mexico are built there because of the lower costs, and in order to get the entry-level models that the American market is looking for, they simply can't build them in the U.S. without increase in automation or cuts in worker pay, and neither one of those is going to fly with the UAW.
Following up on that a bit, tuning into supplier earnings calls over the past couple of weeks, and it seems like for the ones that at least haven't pulled their guidances, the ones that continued did sort of cut back a little bit on their expectations for North American production this year. I imagine for some people that might be maybe a surprise, just since on the base level, the idea of the tariffs is to attract more manufacturing into the U.S. But, at least for this year, we're expecting at least some sort of pullback in production in the region. Can you walk us through, why vehicle production, in the region might be on the decline this year compared to maybe what people were expecting before toward the start of the year?
Yeah, the vehicles produced in Mexico or Canada are going to cost more. So reducing those vehicles being produced simply because the cost has to be passed on to the consumer, and the consumer may not see a minivan from Canada or an Equinox from Mexico being worth the extra money that would be layered on top of the regular price. Once we get past that, then the market itself will decrease in size, and we simply can't move these production facilities to the U.S. as quickly as the tariffs laid out initially. If people within the industry understand that, it's the people outside of the industry who simply don't understand how much time, how much money, how much effort it takes to build a plant, to establish a plant, to move in the suppliers. All these things move in concert with each other and take a long time. It's going to take 3 or 4 years before we can get a greenfield plant up and running with new production. It just doesn't happen overnight. So in the meantime, we're going to see lower sales and lower production, especially in the U.S.
And if I might add to that, Sam, that's assuming they find the workforce, right? And even Treasury Secretary Bessent, despite some in the Trump administration asserting that we want every job in the United States, Secretary Bessent has said recently, we don't want the jobs of yesterday. We want the jobs of the future, right? And we have to be very, I think, clear-eyed that some of the jobs in the supply chain, particularly in the auto parts sector, are not automated yet, right? They are very intensive, and probably we'd have some trouble finding people to do that work here in the United States.
Right. So it takes the financial investment of potentially a new facility or adding production at an existing facility, and then also finding the labor. What else? Is there anything else that describes really what it will take for automakers to move production? And then I'll ask about suppliers specifically too.
Yeah, look, I think it's clear too, this audience knows well, that the auto parts companies sometimes are beholden to the decisions of the OEMs. If they have to localize right next door, if they have to have production in a certain way to support the OEMs, this isn't a decision necessarily that our auto parts companies can make independent. So again, it's very interesting that like with the exceptions, we've just given all the power to the OEMs, which, assuming great power comes great responsibility, I think they'll probably try to do their best. But it does need to be, I think, a discussion among the entire supply chain so that everybody is working together.
Kate brings up the point of the just-in-time production, where a manufacturer is, the supplier has to be nearby. And if you have production in Mexico, there are suppliers right there. The whole point is to bring those parts in as quickly as possible, as soon as the production is ready for them, so there's no warehousing, so that the vehicles can be built as economically as possible. And if you relocate that production from, say, Mexico to the United States, well, now you have to find new suppliers. You have to find a new just-in-time system that relocates that production to the U.S. A Mexican-built vehicle could have 60, 70, 80% local content, and all those suppliers need to be located in the U.S. to avoid the tariffs on what would be a low-cost or low-profit vehicle.
Right. Lori, how are you seeing this from the supplier perspective? Are they trying to kind of become just in time, trying to move more production to the U.S.? We talked a bit yesterday. You talked about a lot of the quoting they're having to do for the automakers. So what's going on from that side?
Well, it's a tremendous upheaval for them on the quote side. But just to add one thing about the OEM side, you got to remember, we've got incredibly underutilized OEM facilities already in the North American market. So I've got plants that were supposed to be converted to battery electric vehicle plants that are sitting at 10% utilization. So imagine being the person who has to make a decision at GM or Ford to say, well, let's redo that plant, get rid of our BEV strategy, build a new plant, leave a plant sitting in Mexico open. I mean, running an assembly plant is an incredibly large capital investment. So we're already sitting at this incredible underutilization of capacity because we've never returned to that 18 million unit mark since pre-COVID, right? So now you look at the supplier base, and right now what we're seeing across hundreds of companies we've talked to in the last 2 months, particularly in the last 2 weeks, quote activity is up about 30 to 40%, but probably 90% of it's not real. It's quote activity. I mean, I just talked to a major OEM this morning. They're quoting everything in the US to find out, one, is it worth the dollars to move it? Because what Kate's saying about people is important. What Sam's saying about the UAW cost to build those parts is important. So even with a tariff, can I, in some countries, continue to produce those parts and still make it cheaper than the US because they don't have the capacity, the people, or the cost structure to support that going into the vehicle? Now, it's a separate discussion with China tariffs because the tariff is so large right now. But if I'm making something in Mexico, can I truly make it cheaper here in the US when you factor in the difference in labor costs? So, most suppliers are not knee-jerk reacting to some of it. I know you've heard of some movement by a couple tier ones and some layoffs, and the administration likes to take credit for that being, that they were the reason that those announcements were being made. And in some cases, some of those announcements were planned anyways. So I don't think anybody's really knee-jerk reacting. And to Sam's point, I mean, moving an assembly plant is 2 to 3 years alone, or converting an assembly plant. It may be easier for a molder to move a mold out of Mexico and bring it to the US, but the question is ultimately where the OEMs will decide that part and that vehicle needs to be made. So it continues the theme of chaos. How do I make that decision in the current environment when it could all change in 6 weeks?
Lori Harbour is partner with Whipfly. Sam Fiorani is vice president of global vehicle forecasting with Auto Forecast Solutions. And Kate Kalukowicz is senior managing director of McClarty Associates. They spoke with our own Hannah Lutz and John Irwin. You can find their full conversation on our Automotive News Congress Conversations live stream on the Automotive News LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube pages. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News journalists Hans Greimel, Larry Velquette, and CJ Moore for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on tariffs, earnings results, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Rudy Nieto of MavSign on the uptick of deepfake fraud to scam vehicles during off-site deliveries.
I think we've got overly reliant on that technology, and that's what's made us the most vulnerable.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.